This document carries within it data, analyses, and truths your government has secured at a great cost. As a senior agent, this document is entrusted to you so you may be informed about the world and all its shadowed corners most never touch. Even in this document, some information remains redacted. This is both for the world's safety as well as your own. If there is further information required, a request must be forwarded to the specific governmental division, whether it be the bureau, ministry, or military office, concerning the details of the request process. Use this document as foundation and build upon it with your own observations, agent. But be warned, many government secrets, some obvious and others subtle, may be revealed to you during the course of reading the provided documentation. If any of these various revelations cause you stress, seek out your supervisor immediately. Discussion of the contents herein is provided with any individual below your current station. If you are to divulge any information regardless of intent, you may be found guilty of conspiracy against the state, a crime punishable by a racer facilitated by a government-sanctioned neuromancer. This is your sole remaining opportunity to reject your station as a senior agent. Do not take it lightly. Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mildra, and I will be your gaming monk for the evening. Back in the 90s, we started to see a motif I've called modern mythos, or the modern veil. This isn't a genre per se, but rather a recurring vibe where an undercurrent of the supernatural is juxtaposed with the modern world over it like a veil. This influence would spread to role-playing games, starting with the mythology we're familiar with, and later getting surreal. But this isn't a review of Chronomancer. Not yet, anyway. No, instead we're talking about Acheron, a self-described Brimpunk RPG that draws upon the likes of Dishonored, SCP Foundation, and Cosmic Horror. I suppose the recently in-development Deadlock could also be applied here, especially given how much of it is drawing upon the 1930s. That's quite a wide sandbox to play in. How does it hold up? Let's find out. Acheron runs at 593 pages, which is certainly a daunting amount. That blow is softened since the PDF contains bookmarks that are pretty well organized, as well as hyperlinks in the table of contents. However, the lack of an index could be a problem in the print version, even if the appendix at the end is appreciated. I will also note that I do enjoy the dossier-like layout for the book, so it's solid work overall, minus the lack of an index. Now, character creation is a mix of the familiar and not so familiar, and we'll be exploring this with Aldine once again. Now, the first step is race and pedigree, with the latter being kind of a subtype of race. The three primary races are humans, dark leechers, and soul menders. Your choice of race determines your attribute maximums, base movement, hit die, your starting hit points, and potential packages of merits and flaws that are unique to each race. I know some of you may be raising an eyebrow over hit die tied to race. We'll get to that. Anyways, of the races available, we'll go with the Warborn. That means we have 30 feet of movement, a recovery die of 1d8, a base health of 8, we'll add in Constitution later, the military training merit, and the won't back down flaw. Step 2 is attributes. This can be done via the usual 46 and drop the lowest method, an array method, or by spending 75 points. All three of them being fairly standard methods. We'll opt for the 46 method, minding the attribute caps. After rolling, we get the following scores: Strength 17, Dexterity 15, Constitution 16, Intelligence 13, Wisdom 17, and Charisma 10. This makes our total health to be 11, and our evasion to be 12. Following this, you choose two attributes to be your primary and secondary attributes. For us, we'll choose Strength and Constitution. Now, step 3 is merits and flaws. Putting aside the free ones from race, we have 6 character points to spend on merits, or gain back through flaws. Regardless, we cannot have more than 9 points total at this stage. We'll spend those on hardy, sharp-eyed, and sensitive, leaving us with 1 character point. That said, I feel it should be noted that character points can also be spent on abilities, which are arranged in a kind of talent tree approach. Step 4 is skills. All characters start with 9 trained skills, and in this case we'll go with athletics, acrobatics, drive, endurance, demolitions, occult, sense motive, spot, and primal empathy. These ones we can spend skill points on a 1-to-1 basis as opposed to a 2-to-1 basis. Following that, we gain a number of skill points based on our choice of primary and secondary attributes, and we'll gain the same amount of skill points at each level up. For us, because of our primary and secondary, we have 5 points to spend. Now with that in mind, we'll place 1 point in athletics, acrobatics, endurance, demolitions, and occult. Now the final step is background. This is determined by the amount of skill points in a given attribute, and generates our income and savings. In our case, we have 40 in income and 160 in savings. Character creation is a flexible, classless affair. That said, I'm not sure how I feel about the fact that in the character creation section, it only briefly glosses over abilities, and spends more time on merits and flaws, leading one to assume that abilities are not something you're getting at this stage. Regardless, this is a point-based system at its core, and that has its benefits and its drawbacks. Yes, point-based allows for a lot of freedom, and that's certainly here. On the other hand, it also has a higher floor to account for. Analysis paralysis is inevitable, especially given the width of options. But because of that, I strongly advise that Dark World Studios puts out some form of pre-gen pack, or at the very least a character creator guide to help mitigate this issue, so people have some idea of what to go with based on what concept they intend on going with. Apologies for using going with twice. Otherwise, you're going to get some pretty nerve-wracking moments about what to pick that matches the particular archetype or concept. Again, analysis paralysis is a thing. Also, a quick reference on abilities and their costs certainly wouldn't hurt. I mean, that is why an appendix is there, isn't it? Acheron uses the familiar D20 formula seen in the world's most litigious fantasy role-playing games, so going into that part of it would be largely redundant. However, I will notice a nice touch that criticals can happen if you succeed the DC of a roll by 10 or more. Now, the first real differentiation in the core mechanics is the sanity system. This isn't exactly the typical roll san, though you do have degrading sanity points and all of that. Each character has a sanity score of 5 times their wisdom score. This isn't tested universally, but instead a reaction to 3 types of tests: violence, supernatural, and morality. Each of these types is rated between high, medium, and low tolerance and assigned a DC of 7, 10, and 13, respectively. Any event that tests sanity is treated as a straight D20 roll with one of the above DCs, usually not having any modifiers, though there are some merits that may change that. If you fail the roll, you take a certain amount of damage in sanity based on the triggering action that caused it. Fortunately, you can only lose sanity once per scene or combat, which is a nice way to prevent the system from being abused. And there's no real fear factor effect of, oh, you lose this amount of sanity just from a certain monster showing up. Additionally, if you lose more than 10 sanity, you run the risk of gaining a virtue, oddity, or a fracture based on a d6 roll and then a d10. On the other hand, a lower sanity will allow you to see and interact more and more with the supernatural, so there's a delicate balance involved. Combat works largely the way you'd expect, regarding initiative rolls, regarding attack rolls, but it is far more lethal due to the combination of low health as well as the high damage of weapons, especially since critical hits can multiply that damage several times over, whether it be double damage or even quadruple damage in a lot of cases, especially in regard to firearms. Speaking of the supernatural, as I mentioned with sanity, that is accounted for through its 2 systems: Mancies, the settings equivalent to psychics, and occult spells. Now the former utilizes psychic points as well as levels in the different disciplines of Mancies: pyromancy, cryomancy, telekinesis, magnetism, biomancy, necromancy, neuromancy, and auramancy. Each has a different contested roll formula that's purchased in levels for 3 character points each. If you purchase 1 level of it, you get the effects from that particular level. Now these rolls may be amplified by spending its psychic energy points to tip the roll in the Mancer's favor on a 1-to-1 basis. Lastly, it should be noted that purchasing levels in 1 will cut off its opposite. For example, if you take a level in Pyromancy, you cannot take levels in Cryomancy. Now, Occultism, on the other hand, is the act of spellcasting, and is bought into through the Magic Adept ability, which costs 3 CP and grants 2 Tier 1 spells of the type of magic acquired. When acquiring new spells or rituals, they can be of a tier you already have or 1 tier above. These can be things that you find or things that you get through character points. In addition, each occult subtype uses a different resource. Arcane uses mana, Fey uses degrees of lucky and unlucky, i.e. you gain unlucky when you cast Fey magic. Spirit uses different attunements to the World Tree as a double-edged sword, adding additional effect to your spells, but giving you a debuff when you use your spells. Demonic uses health, and Eldritch uses sanity. Regardless, casting a spell is an occult skill against the spell's risk, the DC of the spell, which can be increased to grant additional effects. Overall, there's a lot of options in the core system and the supplemental modifications to the rules, though the placement of the actual spells and in an appendix and some of the mechanics for Mancers in the settings section is a bit odd. Equally odd is the mention of level in creature categories as well as other places, since level essentially is CP and there's no real spot for level within the character sheet itself, just the CP distribution. It's very good, there's just some oddities involved. I know I focused a lot on character creation in this, but that's mainly due to it presenting a ripple effect that ties into other aspects. Now, much of the core design is inspired, but the analysis paralysis issue early on is something I feel will play a factor in campaigns, especially for first-timers or folks who are used to a more rigid class system. I see its potential, but a few quality of life changes could work wonders here. As such, I'd give it a stamp of recommended. This is right on the line, admittedly, but while there's a strong identity, but it's only slightly marred by some guidance issues. So, for those who want a bit of horror and conspiracy with a touch of the supernatural, I'd say it's worth a look. Though I will admit the Quick Start Guide is not really a Quick Start Guide in the usual sense, and more like a sampler of the core book, like the free versions of those core books in the Without Number series. Hopefully a proper adventure in some form of starting form will show up in the future. Until then, stay frosty.